For more than 100 years, lights have appeared above Brown Mountain in western North Carolina. They rise slowly from the valley, drift along the ridge, and then vanish into the dark. No one has ever been able to explain why they appear or what they are. Brown Mountain sits in the western part of North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains between Burke and Caldwell counties. The ridge overlooks a deep stretch of the Catawba River Valley, an area that in the early 20th century was sparsely settled and heavily forested. For as long as local residents could remember, strange lights had been reported along the slopes of the mountain after nightfall. People described small glowing shapes appearing in the distance, hovering above the valley floor before drifting slowly along the ridge. By the early 1900s, the sightings had become widely known throughout the region. Travelers passing through the mountains sometimes stopped along the road to watch the valley after dark. Local newspapers began mentioning the lights. What began as scattered reports from mountain residents slowly became something else, a recurring mystery people expected to see. Then, in 1913, the United States Geological Survey sent an investigator to Brown Mountain to determine whether the lights had a natural explanation. Reports of the lights had grown difficult to ignore. On September 24, 1913, the Charlotte Observer published an article describing the strange glowing lights seen near Brown Mountain. Witnesses claimed they appeared regularly after sunset, rising from the valley before drifting along the mountain's edge. The reports caught enough attention that the United States Geological Survey decided to investigate. That same year, a USGS engineer named William B. Greeley traveled to the region to examine the claims. His task was simple: determine whether the lights could be explained. Greeley interviewed residents, studied the geography of the valley, and spent several nights observing the mountain after dark. When he submitted his report, the explanation he offered was far less mysterious than the stories suggested. From the mountain's high vantage points, he believed observers were seeing ordinary lights from the valley below. Train headlights moving along distant rail lines, lanterns carried by workers, occasional brush fires burning along the mountainsides. Seen from miles away across uneven terrain, these lights could appear to float, drift, or hover. In Greeley's view, the geography of the mountains distorted distance and movement. What seemed mysterious was simply perspective. For a time, the explanation appeared to settle the matter, but the sightings did not stop. People continued reporting lights above Brown Mountain long after the report was published, including observers who insisted the lights appeared in places where no rail lines, roads, or settlements existed. Nearly a decade later, the mystery returned to national attention. In 1922, the United States Geological Survey conducted another investigation. This time, the work was carried out by geologist George R. Mansfield. Mansfield traveled through the region, interviewed residents, and reviewed earlier reports of the lights. Like Greeley before him, he considered whether distant train headlights, automobile lamps, or brush fires might explain what people were seeing. His conclusion was cautious. Many sightings, he wrote, could likely be explained by distant sources of light. But not every report matched those explanations perfectly. The lights appeared unpredictably, often at great distance, and rarely stayed visible long enough for careful study. Even after 2 federal investigations, the phenomenon was never completely resolved. Still, people kept watching. From certain overlooks along the Blue Ridge, Brown Mountain stretches across the dark valley below. At night, the forests disappear into shadow, leaving only the faint outline of the ridge against the sky. It was from these distant vantage points that the lights were most often seen. Witnesses described small glowing shapes appearing low in the valley, sometimes hovering in place, sometimes drifting slowly along the slopes before fading away again. The lights rarely lasted long, a few seconds, sometimes a minute, and then they were gone. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, sightings continued to appear in regional newspapers and local accounts. Travelers passing through the mountains sometimes stopped along the roadside at night, waiting quietly to see whether the lights would appear. Many did. Over time, the mystery became part of the region itself, and explanations began reaching further back into the past. One story repeated in newspapers claimed the lights were connected to an old Cherokee legend. According to the tale, a battle once took place in the valley below Brown Mountain. Warriors were said to have died there, and the lights were believed to be the spirits of the fallen, still moving through the mountains at night. Historians later noted that the story appeared to originate from a newspaper article written in 1910 rather than recorded Cherokee oral tradition. But by then, the legend had already taken hold. The lights had become something more than a geological question. They had become part of the landscape. More than a century after the first newspaper reports, people still gather along the overlooks of the Blue Ridge Parkway and the mountain roads nearby. They come after sunset, when the valley below Brown Mountain grows dark and the ridges fade into silhouettes against the night sky. Sometimes they wait for hours, and sometimes the lights appear. Witnesses today describe the same quiet movements recorded more than 100 years ago. Small glowing shapes rising slowly from the valley floor, drifting along the mountainside, then fading again into darkness. Over the years, scientists have suggested many explanations: distant headlights, atmospheric reflections, rare natural gases rising from the earth, optical effects created by the mountain landscape itself. Some sightings may well be explained that way, but the lights have never appeared on command, and they rarely stay long enough to be studied closely. They rise, they move, and they disappear. Long after the investigations ended, long after the reports were written, the valley beneath Brown Mountain still goes dark each night, and sometimes in that darkness, something begins to glow. That was tonight's story. You've been listening to The Midnight Box. Wherever you are, thank you for listening. Good night.